The temperature in Captain Jiwon Park's quarters was unbearable. He stumbled through the door, his uniform soaked with sweat after 18 straight hours of emergency repairs. The life support system had nearly failed, and if he and his crew hadn't worked nonstop, everyone aboard the Horizon's Edge would have suffocated in the cold void of deep space. Jiwon peeled off his shirt and tossed it onto the floor. The cooling system in his personal quarters was broken too, but that repair would have to wait. There were always more important problems on a human deep space vessel. Everything was held together with spare parts, clever thinking, and a lot of hope. He kicked off his boots and stripped down completely. The metal floor felt cool against his bare feet. It was a small relief. Jiwon collapsed onto his bunk without even pulling the thin sheet over himself. Within seconds, exhaustion pulled him into a deep, dreamless sleep. Hours passed. The ship's AI, which had been acting strangely for the past week, failed to alert anyone about the unauthorized vessel approaching from behind a nearby asteroid. The sleek alien craft moved with purpose, its advanced sensors scanning the human ship from top to bottom. Inside that alien vessel, Kayla checked her armor one final time. She was a soldier of the Viridian Empire, sent on a reconnaissance mission to study these new creatures called humans. Her people had been watching humanity's clumsy expansion into space for months now. The Empire's leaders were concerned. These humans had barely discovered faster-than-light travel, yet they were already venturing into restricted zones with ships that looked ready to fall apart. Kayla's orders were simple: infiltrate the human vessel, observe their capabilities, and report back. Do not engage unless absolutely necessary. Her species had strict rules about first contact. But these humans had crossed into a dangerous area of space. The Empire needed to know if they were a threat or just foolish explorers. She studied the thermal scans of the human ship. Most of the crew was asleep. One heat signature caught her attention. A single figure in private quarters, completely still, deep in sleep. Perfect. She would start there. Kayla's ship latched silently onto the Horizon's Edge. Her advanced tools cut through the human hull like it was paper. She slipped inside, her four eyes adjusting quickly to the dim lighting. Everything about this ship looked primitive to her. Exposed wiring, patched walls, equipment that seemed generations old by Viridian standards. How did these humans survive in such conditions? She moved through the corridors like a shadow, her armor's cloaking field making her nearly invisible. Following her scanner, she found the door to Jiwon's quarters. The lock was laughably simple to bypass. The door slid open with a soft hiss. Kayla entered, weapon ready, expecting anything. What she found made her freeze in confusion. A human male lay on the bunk, completely uncovered, entirely naked. His chest rose and fell with deep, peaceful breaths. He had no weapons within reach, no armor, no defenses at all. In Viridian culture, this would be the ultimate gesture of surrender or trust. But the scan showed this human was alone. He hadn't been expecting anyone. Kayla's training took over. She needed to establish dominance, to be in a position of control when he woke up. In her culture, standing over a sleeping opponent was a challenge position, a way to assert superiority before combat. She moved forward and carefully positioned herself over him, one leg on each side of his torso, her weapon pointed at his chest. She waited. Her armor systems hummed quietly. Minutes passed. Then Jiwon's eyes snapped open. For a moment, neither of them moved. Jiwon's brain struggled to process what he was seeing. A figure in black armor straddling him, four glowing eyes staring down at him. Some kind of energy weapon pointed at his face. He was naked. Completely, utterly naked. And there was an alien sitting on top of him. Kayla watched his face carefully. She expected fear, panic, maybe an attempt to fight. Instead, the human's expression shifted from shock to confusion to something that looked almost like embarrassment. His hands remained at his sides. He didn't reach for a weapon or try to throw her off. Jiwon cleared his throat. His mind raced through his limited options. This was clearly first contact with an alien species. He was the captain of humanity's furthest exploration vessel. This moment could determine the future of human-alien relations. And he was completely naked with an alien soldier sitting on him. He slowly raised both hands, palms open, in what he hoped was a universal gesture of peace. His mouth was dry. He tried to think of something diplomatic to say, something meaningful that would represent humanity well. "Bathroom?" he said quietly. Kayla's translator implant caught the word but couldn't process its meaning. The tone seemed non-threatening. She tilted her head, studying him more carefully. This human wasn't acting like prey or an enemy. He seemed calm despite the obvious disadvantage of his position. Interesting. Jiwon gestured slowly toward the small door on the side of his quarters. I really need to use the bathroom, he said, speaking slowly and clearly. And maybe put on some pants. Kayla's weapon didn't waver, but her combat instincts were telling her something unexpected. This human wasn't preparing to fight. He was naked not as a gesture, but because of something else. The room was hot. His uniform lay in a pile on the floor, soaked with sweat. Understanding began to dawn on her. She stood up carefully, backing away but keeping her weapon trained on him. Jiwon sat up slowly, very aware of how ridiculous this situation was. He grabbed the sheet and wrapped it around his waist. Thank you, he said. He pointed to himself. Jiwon, I'm Jiwon. Human, captain of this ship. He spoke each word clearly, hoping she had some kind of translator. Kayla's implant worked frantically to decode the language. Patterns began to emerge. The sounds connected to meanings. She understood perhaps one word in 5, but it was a start. She kept her weapon ready but lowered it slightly. Her free hand tapped controls on her armor's forearm display. A holographic image appeared between them, a map of this region of space. She pointed to a section marked in red, then to the human ship's current position. They were in a restricted zone. Jiwon looked at the map and felt his stomach sink. They had crossed into someone's territory. That explained the infiltration. He nodded slowly and pointed to the map, then made a gesture of apology. For the first time, Kayla felt a small measure of curiosity overcome her caution. These humans had stumbled into a war zone between the Viridian Empire and the Krell Swarm, and they didn't even know it. They were flying a ship held together with primitive repairs into the most dangerous region of known space. They were either incredibly brave or incredibly stupid. She suspected it might be both. The ship's intercom suddenly crackled to life. Captain Park? Are you awake? We've got a problem with the sensors. Jiwon and Kayla stared at each other. This strange first contact was about to get a lot more complicated. 24 hours had passed since Kayla had woken Jiwon in the most awkward first contact in galactic history. Now they sat across from each other in the ship's small conference room, both trying to understand how this situation had spiraled so quickly. Jiwon wore his captain's uniform now. Though it was as patched and worn as everything else on the ship, Kayla had removed her helmet, revealing a face that was almost human but not quite. Her skin had a slight bluish tint, and those 4 eyes, too, where humans had them, and 2 smaller ones on her temples, followed his every movement. The ship's AI and Kayla's translator implant had worked together through the night. Now they could communicate, though the translation was still rough around the edges. Your people have been watching us? Jiwon asked, leaning forward. His engineering team had already found and removed 3 scanning devices Kayla had planted around the ship. She hadn't tried to stop them. For 6 of your months, Kayla answered. Her voice had a musical quality that the translator couldn't quite capture. The Viridian Empire monitors all new spacefaring species, especially those who enter restricted space. Jiwon rubbed his tired eyes. We didn't know it was restricted. Our long-range sensors are limited. We thought this region was empty. Kayla made a gesture that might have been the Viridian equivalent of a laugh. Empty? This is a war zone. The Krell Swarm has been trying to break through our defensive line for 300 years. We hold them here, or they spread across the galaxy like a plague. The word Krell didn't translate well. Jiwon's AI had to search its database for similar concepts. What it found made his blood run cold. A hive mind species that consumed other civilizations. Billions of bioships that could adapt to any weapon. Hundreds of conquered worlds. And we just flew right into the middle of this, Jiwon said quietly. Yes. Kayla's 4 eyes studied him carefully. In a ship that my engineers say should not even be able to fly. Your reactor is held together with metal patches. Your life support fails constantly. Your weapons are barely functional. Yet you traveled farther from your homeworld than species twice your age. Why? Jiwon thought about how to answer that. How could he explain humanity's drive to explore, to push boundaries, to see what was beyond the next star? How could he make her understand that humans had always survived by being stubborn and creative? Because we had to know what was out there, he said finally. And because we're good at making things work even when they shouldn't. Kayla tilted her head. My people have a saying. A tool used beyond its design will break. You humans seem to believe the opposite. We call it duct tape and determination, Jiwan said with a slight smile. If something breaks, we fix it. If we don't have the right parts, we make do with what we have. We've been doing it for thousands of years. The translator struggled with duct tape. Kayla's armor systems had to analyze the concept. When she understood, her expression shifted to something between disbelief and concern. You build critical systems using temporary fixes, and then rely on them for survival? When we have to, yes. Kayla stood and walked to the viewport. Outside, stars drifted by slowly. The Viridian Empire has protocols for everything. When equipment fails, we replace it with proper components. When a ship is damaged beyond safe operation, we retire it. We do not improvise with critical systems. That must be nice, Jiwan said. There was no bitterness in his voice, just a statement of fact. Humanity doesn't have that luxury yet. We have exactly 12 deep space vessels. If we waited until everything was perfect before exploring, we'd never leave our solar system. Before Kayla could respond, alarms shrieked through the ship. Jiwan was on his feet instantly, running for the bridge. Kayla followed, her armor systems already analyzing the threat. On the bridge, First Officer Minho stared at the sensor display with wide eyes. Captain, we've got a contact. It just appeared out of nowhere, 3,000 kilometers off our port side. Jiwan looked at the screen. The ship was organic, all curves and ridges like something alive. It pulsed with a sickly green light. Krell Scout, Kayla said from behind him. Her voice was tight. It detected your ship's energy signature. It's scanning you now, learning everything about human technology. Can we outrun it? Jiwan asked. Minho shook his head. Our FTL drive is still cooling from the last jump. We need at least 20 minutes. Kayla's hand moved to a control pad on her armor. My ship can destroy it, but doing so will reveal my presence here. The Empire will not be pleased that I violated protocol. Jiwan watched the Krell Scout circling them like a predator. Every second it studied their ship. It learned more about humanity. If it escaped and reported back to the swarm, they would know about Earth, about humanity's weaknesses, about everything. An idea formed in his mind. It was crazy. It was dangerous. It was exactly the kind of improvisation that Kayla found so disturbing about humans. How close would we need to get to that scout for our weapons to be effective? Jiwan asked. Minho checked his console. Our railguns could damage it at about 500 meters. But Captain, that thing is fast. If we approach, it could easily... It thinks we're helpless, Jiwan interrupted. Look at its behavior. It's scanning us, studying us. It doesn't see us as a threat. He turned to Kayla. Does the Krell have any concept of ships playing dead? Kayla's eyes widened as she understood his plan. No. The Krell analyze threats based on energy signatures and weapon systems. If you power down, it will categorize you as disabled prey, not worth immediate destruction. Perfect. Jiwan started giving orders. Minho shut down everything except life support and one maneuvering thruster. Make us look dead in the water. Heejin, reroute all available power to the railguns, but keep them cold until I give the word. The crew moved with practiced efficiency. Within minutes, the horizon's edge went dark. Only minimal systems remained active. On sensors, they looked like a derelict. The Krell Scout's behavior changed immediately. It moved closer, its scans becoming more aggressive. It was studying the dead ship, trying to understand this new species it had discovered. Kayla watched in fascination. This was insane by Viridian standards. You didn't lure an enemy closer. You engaged from maximum range with overwhelming firepower. Yet here was this human captain, risking everything on a gamble. The Krell Scout drifted to within 600 meters. Then 500, steady, Jiwan whispered. Let it get confident, 400 meters. 300, now. Jiwan shouted. The horizon's edge roared to life. Every system came online at once. The railguns, supercharged with the power meant for the FTL drive, fired in sequence. 3 tungsten slugs crossed the distance in less than a second. The Krell Scout tried to evade, but it was too close, too confident. The first slug tore through its forward section. The second hit center mass. The third punched out through its rear, leaving a trail of frozen organic matter. The scout ship convulsed and went still. Its lights flickered and died. Minho let out a breath he'd been holding. Direct hits. It's disabled. No, wait, it's breaking apart. They watched as the Krell Scout slowly tore itself into pieces. unable to maintain cohesion after such catastrophic damage. Ji-won turned to Kayla. Her 4 eyes were locked on him with an expression he couldn't quite read. That was... She started, then stopped. Her translator couldn't find the right word. Crazy, brilliant, terrifying? Improvisation, Ji-won said calmly. We saw an opportunity and took it. Kayla thought about what she had just witnessed. A captain who turned his ship into bait, a crew that followed orders without question, even when those orders seemed suicidal. A battle plan created in seconds using damaged equipment and pure bluff. The Viridian Empire had been right to be concerned. These humans were dangerous, not because of their technology or their weapons, but because they thought differently. They took risks that made no logical sense and somehow made them work. The Krell will send more ships when this scout doesn't report back, she said finally. I know, Ji-won replied. How long do we have? Hours, maybe less. Ji-won nodded and looked at his crew. They were exhausted, their ship was damaged, and they were trapped in a war zone, but not one of them looked ready to give up. Then we'd better get ready, he said, because if more are coming, we're going to need a bigger trap. 3 days had passed since the destroyed scout. The Horizon's Edge and Kayla's stealth corvette drifted together in the shadow of a dead moon, waiting. Every sensor was active, searching for the revenge they knew would come. Ji-won stood on the bridge, staring at the tactical display. Kayla stood beside him, her armor interface linked to his ship's systems. Over the past 72 hours, they had formed an unlikely working relationship. She provided information about the Krell. He showed her how humans fought when outnumbered and outgunned. Contact, Minho announced. His voice was steady, but his hands trembled slightly on the controls. Multiple contacts. My God, there are so many. The display lit up with red markers. 47 Krell bioships emerged from slipspace in a coordinated pattern, surrounding their position completely. Each ship was the size of a building, pulsing with that same sickly green light. They moved with purpose like blood cells hunting an infection. This is a full assault formation, Kayla said quietly. They're not here to scout. They're here to eliminate the threat that killed their probe. Ji-won's mind raced through the mathematics. His ship had 34 crew members. 1 human ship with damaged systems. 1 Viridian stealth corvette with advanced weapons. Against 47 Krell vessels designed for one purpose: consuming and destroying. You should leave, Ji-won said to Kayla. Your ship is fast. You could slip past them while they're focused on us. Kayla looked at him with all 4 eyes. That would be the logical choice. My orders were to observe and report, not to engage in combat. If I leave now, I can return to Viridian space with valuable intelligence about both the Krell and humanity. But, Ji-won asked, hearing the hesitation in her voice, but I am not certain I want to be the kind of person who abandons allies in battle. She paused. Is that how you say it, allies? Ji-won felt something shift in his chest. 3 days ago, this alien soldier had infiltrated his ship. Now she was choosing to stay and fight beside them. Yes, that's exactly how you say it. Then I will stay. Though you should know, my ship's AI is currently predicting a 97% probability of our total destruction. Only 97? Minho said from his station. My calculations say 99. Despite everything, Ji-won smiled. Then we'll aim for that 3%. The Krell formation began to close in. Their bioships launched smaller attack drones, hundreds of them swarming through space like insects. Kayla's corvette opened fire first, its energy weapons cutting through the drones with precision. Each shot was perfectly calculated, every movement optimized for efficiency. It wasn't enough. For every drone destroyed, 2 more took its place. Captain, Hyejin called from engineering, I've been thinking about something you said once, about how a ship is just metal and machinery, but a crew is irreplaceable. Now's not the best time for philosophy, Ji-won replied as the first Krell impacts rocked the Horizon's Edge. Just hear me out, sir. What if we use the Edge as a weapon? We overload the reactor, set it on a collision course with their command ship, then evacuate everyone to Kayla's corvette. The bridge went silent except for the sound of alarms and weapon fire. Kayla turned to stare at Hyejin. You want to deliberately destroy your own ship? That's insane. It's human, Ji-won said softly. He was already running calculations in his head. The Horizon's Edge was heavily damaged. Even if they survived this battle, she probably couldn't make it back to Earth. But if they could take out the Krell command vessel, the rest of the swarm would be disorganized, easier for Kayla's corvette to handle. We can't fit 34 people in my ship, Kayla protested. It was designed for a crew of 6. The life support systems can't handle that many. They don't have to handle us for long, Ji-won said. Just long enough to get us somewhere safe. We'll pack in tight. We've done more with less. Kayla's AI system screamed warnings at her. This plan violated every protocol, every safety regulation, every logical approach to combat. You didn't sacrifice valuable ships. You didn't overload your life support. You didn't ram enemy vessels when you had other options. But as she watched the human crew already preparing for evacuation, moving with quick efficiency despite the chaos around them, she understood something fundamental about these strange creatures. They didn't fight to preserve their equipment. They fought to protect each other. And if sacrificing a ship meant their crew survived, they would do it without hesitation. My AI is having what you might call a breakdown, Kayla said. It cannot process the logic of this plan. Tell it to shut up and calculate the optimal ramming angle, Ji-won replied. He opened ship-wide communications. All crew, this is the captain. We're going to do something that's going to seem crazy. We're going to aim our ship directly at the biggest Krell vessel and hit it as hard as we can. You have 8 minutes to gather essential supplies and get to the evacuation pods. We'll launch pods toward Kayla's ship and she'll pick us up. Don't think. Don't question. Just move. The crew moved. No panic, no arguments. They had followed Ji-won this far into deep space. They would follow him through this. Hyejin worked frantically in engineering, overriding every safety system the Horizon's Edge had. The reactor began building to dangerous levels, far beyond what it was designed to handle. She set timers, programmed autopilot coordinates, and created a countdown display that would tell them exactly when to evacuate. On the bridge, Minho plotted the course. The Krell command vessel was the largest of the bioships, its surface covered in pulsing nodes that coordinated the entire swarm. Taking it out would be like cutting the head off a snake. 6 minutes to collision, Minho announced. All systems overloading on schedule. Kayla's Corvette pulled closer, its cargo bay doors open. The human evacuation pods began launching, small capsules containing 3 or 4 crew members each, shooting toward her ship like seeds from a dying flower. Ji-won stayed on the bridge with Minho and Hyejin until the last moment. They watched their ship accelerate toward the Krell formation, gaining speed with every second. The Krell vessels tried to intercept, but Kayla's Corvette provided covering fire. Its weapon systems pushed beyond their safety limits. 2 minutes, Minho said. Time to go, Captain, they ran. Through corridors they had walked 1,000 times, past quarters where they had slept, around corners they knew by heart. The Horizon's Edge had been their home for 2 years. Now they were abandoning her. They reached the last evacuation pod just as the countdown hit 60 seconds. The pod launched hard, throwing them back against their seats. Through the small viewport, Ji-won watched his ship shrink in the distance, still accelerating, still flying toward its target. The Krell command vessel tried to evade. It was too large, too slow. The Horizon's Edge struck it at near light speed. The explosion was beautiful in its destruction. The overloaded reactor detonated at the moment of impact, releasing energy equivalent to a small star. The Krell command ship simply ceased to exist, vaporized in an instant. The shockwave caught a dozen nearby bioships, tearing them apart. More vessels collided with debris and with each other as the formation fell into chaos. 15 Krell ships destroyed in a single moment. 20 more damaged and drifting. Inside Kayla's Corvette, alarm screamed as 34 humans packed into spaces designed for 6. The air was already getting thin. The temperature rose rapidly from too many bodies in too small a space. Kayla's AI was predicting complete life support failure in 17 minutes. But the remaining Krell vessels were retreating, fleeing from an enemy that would destroy itself just to take them down. They had never encountered anything like it. Their collective intelligence couldn't process the concept of acceptable sacrifice. Kayla pushed her ship to maximum speed, racing away from the battlefield. Her hands shook slightly on the controls. She had just witnessed humans do the impossible. They had taken a losing battle and turned it into a victory by being willing to lose everything. In the cramped cargo bay, Ji-won sat with his crew. Some were crying. Others sat in shocked silence. They had survived, but their ship was gone. Their home was gone. Did we win? Hyejin asked quietly. Ji-won thought about the question. They had destroyed or driven off 47 Krell vessels. They had protected Viridian space. They had shown an enemy that humanity would fight with everything they had, but the cost was their ship and nearly their lives. "Yes," he said finally. "We won." Kayla's voice came through the comm system. "I'm setting course for Vorath III. It's an abandoned moon, but it has breathable atmosphere. We should reach it before life support fails completely." She paused. "Your ship's sacrifice destroyed the Krell command structure for this sector. The Empire will want to know how you achieved this." Jiwan leaned his head back against the cold metal wall. "We did it because it was the only option that gave everyone a chance to survive. Sometimes the ship has to die so the crew can live." In the pilot's seat, Kayla thought about those words. The Viridian Empire had thousands of ships but treated each one as irreplaceable. Humans had barely a dozen vessels, yet they were willing to sacrifice them without hesitation. She was beginning to understand why her superiors feared these creatures. They didn't fight like civilized species. They fought to win, no matter the cost. The crash landing was hard but survivable. Kyla's Corvette carved a long scar across the jungle floor of Vorath III before finally skidding to a stop against a cluster of massive trees. Warning lights flashed throughout the ship. The engines were dead. Hull breaches in 3 sections. Navigation offline. Weapon systems damaged. Jiwan was the first one out, stumbling down the cargo ramp into humid air that smelled of rot and growing things. Behind him, 33 other humans emerged, bruised and shaken but alive. They had escaped the Krell swarm only to crash on an abandoned moon deep in enemy territory. Kayla limped out last, her armor's right leg actuator damaged from the impact. She looked at her ship with an expression that might have been grief. This vessel has served the Viridian Empire for 43 years. It survived the Battle of Kareth Station. It completed 16 deep space missions, and now it ends here. Destroyed trying to rescue humans. "It's not destroyed," G1 said, already walking around the hull and assessing the damage. "It's just really, really broken." "There's a difference." Minho joined him, pulling out a portable scanner. "Captain, we should secure the perimeter first. This moon might be abandoned, but those Krell ships know we came this direction." He was right. Within an hour, they had established a basic camp around the crashed Corvette. Heejin organized teams to salvage what they could from the ship. Kayla watched in growing horror as humans began dismantling Viridian technology with tools that looked primitive by her standards. "You cannot simply tear apart military systems," she protested as Heejin's team removed an intact weapon array from the Corvette's port side. "That technology is classified. It took my people decades to develop." Heejin looked up from her work, grease smeared across her face. "Right now, it's just expensive scrap metal attached to a crashed ship. We need weapons that we can carry and use. Can you fire this array if the ship can't fly?" "Well, no, but then we're taking it apart and making something useful out of it." Heejin went back to work, her hands moving with practiced efficiency. Kayla turned to Jiwan. "Is your species always this destructive?" "Resourceful is the word I'd use," Jiwan replied. He was studying a tactical map of Vorath III that they had pulled from the Corvette's computer. "Look at this. This moon has 3 Krell hatcheries and 2 major supply depots. They're using it as a staging ground for attacks on Viridian space. Yes, the Empire has known about this for years. We lack the forces to assault it directly, so we maintain the defensive line and prevent them from expanding." "What if we didn't just sit here waiting to be rescued?" Jiwan said slowly. "What if we attacked?" Kayla's 4 eyes widened. "You want 34 humans with improvised weapons to attack Krell installations?" "Captain, I respect what you did in the battle, but this is madness. The Krell have thousands of drones on this moon. Their hatcheries produce hundreds more every day. Which is exactly why we need to destroy them." G1 called over Minho and several others. "Think about it. The Krell are expecting the Viridians to maintain a defensive position. They're not expecting a ground assault, especially not from behind their lines. We could hit them before they even realize we're a threat." Minho studied the map. "The nearest hatchery is about 40 kilometers through jungle terrain. We have no idea what's between here and there. We'd be going in blind." "We've been going in blind since we left Earth," Heejin pointed out. "At least now we know what we're fighting." Over the next few hours, they argued. Kayla insisted that the logical course was to hide, conserve resources, and wait for a Viridian rescue fleet. Jiwan countered that the Krell would find them long before any rescue arrived. Better to take the fight to the enemy than to wait here and die. What disturbed Kayla most wasn't the plan itself. It was how quickly the other humans agreed to it. They looked at the Krell installations, did quick calculations about their chances of success, and simply nodded. They were going to attack an enemy stronghold with makeshift weapons because their captain thought it was better than sitting still. "Do all human military operations work like this?" she asked. "Someone suggests something suicidal and everyone just agrees?" "Only when it makes sense," Minho said with a tired smile. "Captain Park hasn't gotten us killed yet." "Yet," Kayla repeated quietly. They spent the next day preparing. Heejin's team converted Viridian energy weapons into portable versions. They weren't as efficient as the original designs, but they worked. They gathered supplies from the crashed Corvette, stripped it of anything useful, and left it as an empty shell. Kayla found herself helping despite her reservations. She showed them how to operate Viridian equipment, how to identify Krell weak points, how to move through hostile territory. The humans absorbed information like sponges, asking questions and adapting techniques to fit their needs. On the second night, they moved out. 34 humans and 1 Viridian, carrying weapons they barely understood, heading toward an enemy installation that could easily kill them all. The jungle was dense and alien, filled with sounds that didn't belong to any Earth creature. Bioluminescent plants cast strange shadows. Things moved in the darkness around them. They traveled in silence using hand signals to communicate. Kayla found herself impressed by their discipline. These weren't professional soldiers. They were explorers, engineers, scientists. Yet they moved through enemy territory with practiced caution. The first Krell patrol found them on the third day. 6 drones, each the size of a car, emerged from the undergrowth with no warning. They moved on multiple legs, their bodies covered in organic armor that shifted and flowed like oil. The humans reacted instantly. Years of training in desperate situations had taught them to act without hesitation. Modified Viridian weapons fired, their energy beams cutting through Krell armor. The drones tried to adapt, but the humans didn't give them time. They hit hard and fast, overwhelming the patrol before it could signal for help. When it was over, Kayla stared at the smoking remains of the drones. The entire fight had lasted less than 30 seconds. The humans were already moving again, checking for injuries, conserving ammunition, maintaining their march. "You killed them before they could adapt," she said, catching up to Jiwan. "The Krell's greatest strength is their ability to learn and counter enemy tactics, but you didn't give them that chance." "Speed and surprise," Jiwan said. "When you can't win a straight fight, you change the rules of engagement." They continued through the jungle. More patrols, more quick, brutal fights. The humans learned with each encounter, finding better ways to strike and retreat, to use the terrain to their advantage. Kayla watched them evolve their tactics in real time, adapting to an enemy they had never fought before. On the 5th day, they reached the first hatchery. It was a massive organic structure, half buried in the ground, pulsing with that same sickly green light. Hundreds of drones moved around it in patterns that seemed almost ritualistic. They were tending to egg sacs, each one containing a developing Krell warrior. "We can't fight that many," Minho whispered from their hiding spot in the trees. "Even with surprise, we'd be overwhelmed in minutes." "We don't need to fight them," Hyejin said. She pointed to the structure's base where massive root-like tendrils connected it to the ground. "Look, it's drawing nutrients from the soil. Those roots are probably its weakest point. If we could sever enough of them, the structure would collapse," Kayla finished. She ran calculations through her armor's systems. "But you'd need to place charges at multiple points simultaneously, and you'd have to get close enough to plant them without being detected." "Then we split into teams," Jiwan decided. "Small groups moving quietly. We place the charges, set timers, and get out. By the time the Krell realize what's happening, it'll be too late." They spent the rest of the day preparing. Hyejin and her engineers converted power cells from the Viridian weapons into improvised explosives. They weren't sophisticated, but they would create enough force to sever the organic roots. That night, they moved in. 5 teams, 4 people each, approaching from different directions. Kayla went with Jiwan's team, her armor stealth systems helping them avoid patrols. They crawled through mud and undergrowth, moving a few meters at a time, freezing whenever drones passed nearby. It took 3 hours to plant all the charges. 3 hours of terror, of being certain that every sound would give them away. But the humans moved with impossible patience, waiting minutes or even hours between movements when necessary. When the charges detonated, the effect was spectacular. The massive roots exploded in sequence, each blast timed perfectly. The hatchery shuddered. Cracks spread across its surface. Egg sacs ruptured, spilling their contents onto the ground. The structure began to collapse in on itself. The Krell drones went mad with confusion. Without clear orders, they rushed around the dying hatchery, trying to save what they could. They never thought to look for the attackers melting back into the jungle. Jiwan's team regrouped at the extraction point. Everyone was exhausted, covered in mud, and worse, but alive. Against all odds, they were all alive. One down, Jiwan said quietly, watching the distant glow of the burning hatchery. 2 more to go. Kayla looked at the humans around her. They were already planning the next attack, discussing what they had learned, how they could do better. They had just destroyed a Krell stronghold, and instead of celebrating, they were prepared 2 weeks in hell. That was how Minho described their time on Vorath III in his personal log. 2 weeks of guerrilla warfare against an enemy that seemed endless. 2 weeks of hit-and-run attacks, of sleeping in mud, of fighting with weapons held together by hope and improvisation. They had destroyed all 3 Krell hatcheries. They had sabotaged 2 major supply lines. The Krell presence on Vorath III was crippled, maybe permanently. But the cost had been terrible. Jiwan sat against a tree at their temporary camp, watching what remained of his crew. Only 19 humans were left. 15 had died in the past 2 weeks. Each death weighed on him like a stone. He knew their names, their families back on Earth, their dreams of what they would do after the mission ended. Hyejin had died 3 days ago. She had volunteered to plant charges on the second hatchery's main support structure. The Krell had detected her at the last moment. She detonated the charges early, ensuring the mission succeeded but giving herself no time to escape. Her last words over the comm were, "Tell my sister I saw the stars." Minho had taken command of engineering after that. He was good at it, but the pain in his eyes never went away. He had loved Hyejin, though neither of them had ever said it out loud. Now he never would. Kayla sat nearby, her armor battered and scarred from countless fights. She had lost her left arm 2 days ago when a Krell drone caught them in an ambush. The weapon had sheared through her armor and the limb beneath it. Only quick thinking from the remaining humans had kept her from bleeding out. She looked at the sealed stump where her arm had been. Viridian medical technology could regrow it, but that would take months in a proper facility. For now, she fought one-handed, adapting to the limitation with grim determination. "I understand now why the Empire fears you," she said quietly to Jiwan. "It's not your technology or your numbers, it's this." She gestured at the camp, at the exhausted humans still maintaining their weapons, still preparing for the next fight. "You calculate acceptable losses the way other species calculate fuel consumption. We don't think of them as acceptable," Jiwan said, his voice rough. "Every death hurts. Every person we lose is a hole that can never be filled. But we fight anyway because the alternative is worse. The alternative is retreat, survival, living to fight another day. The alternative is letting the Krell control this moon and use it to launch attacks on Viridian space. The alternative is going home and knowing we could have stopped them but chose not to. That's not living. That's just being alive." Kayla thought about the distinction. In Viridian culture, survival was the highest priority. You preserved your forces, maintained your strength, never took risks that might result in total defeat. But humans seemed to believe that some things were worth dying for. She had watched them grieve their dead. They held small ceremonies, said words in languages she didn't understand, and then moved forward. They carried their fallen friends' personal effects, made promises to deliver them to families on Earth, and kept fighting. The grief never left them, but it didn't stop them either. A scout ran into camp, breathing hard. "Captain, we've got a problem. Long-range sensors just picked up a massive Krell force incoming. It looks like they're sending everything they have left to wipe us out." Jiwan stood up, his body protesting every movement. 2 weeks of constant combat had left everyone battered. How many? Hundreds. Maybe thousands. They're converging on our position from all directions. We've got maybe 6 hours before they arrive. Minho joined them, already calculating trajectories on a portable display. "We can't outrun that many. Even if we scattered, they'd hunt us down. And Kayla's Corvette is still just a stripped wreck. We're trapped." Jiwan looked at the exhausted faces around him. 19 humans. 1 wounded Viridian, against an army. The mathematics were simple and cruel. "There is one option," Kayla said slowly. She stood up, swaying slightly from blood loss and exhaustion. I've managed to repair the Corvette's main reactor and navigation systems. The weapons are gone, the shields are damaged, but it can fly. Barely, and it's fast. Fast enough to outrun the Krell? G1 asked. No, but fast enough to lead them away while a rescue fleet extracts your people. Silence fell over the camp. Everyone understood what she was suggesting. One person flying the Corvette as a decoy, drawing the Krell swarm away, while a Viridian rescue ship picked up the surviving humans. It was a suicide mission. Absolutely not, G1 said. We don't sacrifice people just to... You have sacrificed 15 people in 2 weeks, Kayla interrupted. You destroyed your own ship to win a battle. You sent teams into situations knowing some wouldn't return. Don't lecture me about sacrifice, Captain. I learned it from watching you. That's different. I'm the captain. I'm responsible for... And I am the one who has a life debt to you and your crew. In my culture, such debts are sacred. You saved me when I infiltrated your ship. You could have killed me, but you didn't. You fought beside me, protected me, kept me alive when I should have died. The debt must be repaid. Minho stepped forward. She's right, Captain. We need a real pilot for this. Someone who knows that ship's systems. Someone who can actually pull it off. None of us can fly Viridian tech well enough. G1 felt like the world was spinning. He had lost so many people already. The thought of losing Kayla too after everything they had been through was almost too much to bear. There has to be another way, he said. But even he could hear the desperation in his voice. There isn't. Kayla walked to where her helmet sat on a rock. She picked it up with her remaining hand. I've already sent a coded signal to the nearest Viridian fleet. They'll arrive in approximately 5 hours. That gives me time to prepare the Corvette and draw the Krell away. Over the next few hours, they worked together one last time. Kayla jury-rigged systems in the Corvette, preparing it for one final flight. The humans helped, even though each repair brought them closer to the moment she would leave. G1 found himself working beside her in the pilot's compartment, helping to reroute power systems. They worked in silence for a long time. I'm sorry, he said finally, for dragging you into this. For all of it, don't be. These 2 weeks have been the most terrifying and exhilarating of my life. My people spend centuries following protocols and maintaining order. You humans taught me that sometimes the only way forward is to break every rule and hope for the best. We call it improvisation. I call it insanity, but effective insanity. She paused in her work. Tell me something. When you woke up and found me standing over you that first day, what was your first thought? Jiwon laughed despite everything. Honestly, I thought I was having the weirdest dream ever, and I really needed to use the bathroom. Kayla made a sound that might have been a laugh. Not exactly the first contact either of our species imagined. No, but maybe that's fitting. Nothing about this mission has gone as planned. The time came too quickly. The Krell swarm appeared on sensors, moving toward their position like a dark wave. Kayla sealed her armor and prepared to board the Corvette. The remaining humans gathered to see her off. These people who had fought beside her, who had protected her, who had shown her what it meant to fight for something bigger than yourself. She had watched them die and grieve and keep fighting. She had learned what it meant to be human, even though she wasn't one. Jiwon walked with her to the Corvette's ramp. He wanted to say something meaningful, something that would capture everything he felt. Instead, all he managed was, "Give them hell." Kayla's translator converted the phrase. She understood it perfectly. "Humanity, fuck yeah," she said in careful English, pronouncing each word with precision. Jiwon smiled despite the tears on his face. He leaned in and kissed her forehead, just below where her helmet would seal. "Survive this. Find a way. You've learned from the best improvisers in the galaxy." "I will try," she said. Then she turned and walked up the ramp without looking back. If she looked back, she might not be able to leave. The Corvette's engines roared to life. It lifted off slowly, system warnings flashing red throughout the cockpit. Kayla pushed the throttle forward, feeling the ship respond. It was damaged, barely functional, but it would fly. It had to. The Krell swarm detected her immediately. Thousands of drones changed course, pursuing the escaping ship. Kayla led them on a chase through the moon's asteroid ring, weaving between rocks, using every trick she had learned from watching humans improvise their way through impossible situations. Behind her, energy readings showed the drones catching up. Her ship was falling apart, hull plating peeled away. Systems failed one by one. But she had led them far enough. The humans were safe. The rescue fleet would reach them. Kayla thought about her long life in the Viridian Empire. Decades of following orders, maintaining discipline, doing everything by the book, and then 2 weeks with humans that taught her more about living than all those years of existence. She set the reactor to overload. The timer counted down. 30 seconds. 20. 10. The lead Krell drone was right behind her, close enough that she could see its organic weapon systems charging. She smiled inside her helmet. For Heejin, she said quietly. For all of them, 0. The explosion was visible from the surface of Vorath 3rd. Jiwon watched the flash of light against the night sky. 3 months. 93 days since Vorath 3. Jiwon had counted everyone. He sat in his new office on Earth, staring at reports he couldn't focus on. After the rescue, he and his surviving crew had been brought home as heroes. There had been ceremonies, medals, promotions. Jiwon was now Admiral Park, the youngest person to ever hold that rank in Earth's deep space fleet. The media called him the man who had made first contact with an alien alliance. Politicians wanted him to speak at conferences. Military leaders asked his advice on combat tactics. None of it mattered. All he could think about was Kayla's face in those final moments, and the 19 crew members who had made it home versus the 15 who hadn't. Minho found him there, surrounded by unopened files and cold coffee. Still not sleeping, sir? Can't, Jiwon admitted. He gestured at the chair across from his desk. Minho sat down heavily. He looked older than he had 3 months ago. They all did. The psychologists say it's survivor's guilt, Minho said. They say it will get better with time. Do you believe that? No. I think we carry them with us forever. Hyejin, the others, even Kyla. Minho paused. You know what the worst part is? I'm glad we survived. I'm happy to be alive. And I feel guilty about being happy when so many didn't make it. Jiwon nodded. He understood exactly what Minho meant. The Viridian Empire had opened formal diplomatic channels with Earth after the mission. There were trade, agreements, technology exchanges, military alliances being negotiated. Humanity was no longer alone in the galaxy. It was a new era for their species. But the cost had been terrible, and Jiwon wasn't sure it had been worth it. A priority message alert chimed on his desk terminal. Jiwon almost ignored it, but Minho leaned forward, reading the sender information. His eyes widened. Captain, Admiral, you need to see this. It's from Viridian High Command. Jiwon pulled up the message. It was encrypted with the highest security protocols marked urgent. He entered his authorization codes, and the text appeared on screen. To Admiral Jiwon Park. Subject recovery operation. We have located the escape pod of Commander Kayla. She is alive but critically injured. We are transmitting coordinates for immediate transfer. Time is essential. Jiwon read the message 3 times, certain he was misunderstanding something. Alive. Kayla was alive. It seemed impossible. He had watched her ship explode. He had seen the blast that should have vaporized everything within a kilometer. How? He said out loud. Minho was already pulling up data files attached to the message. According to this, she ejected in an emergency pod at the last possible second. The explosion caught her anyway, but the pod's shields absorbed enough of the blast to keep her alive. She's been in a medical coma for 11 weeks while their regeneration technology kept her from dying. Jiwon was on his feet before he realized he was moving. I need transport to Viridian space now, today. You're the ambassador, Minho said with the first real smile Jiwon had seen from him in months. Use your rank. Tell them it's a diplomatic priority. Within 6 hours, Jiwon was aboard a shuttle heading to the Viridian homeworld. Earth Command had approved his request immediately. They wanted their new ambassador to maintain good relations with their alien allies. They had no idea that Jiwon would have gone even if they had said no. The journey took 2 days. Jiwon spent most of it staring out the viewport at the stars, thinking about everything that had happened. Kayla had sacrificed herself to save his crew. She had learned about sacrifice from watching humans, but she had taken it to a level that even surprised him. and somehow, impossibly, she had survived. The Viridian homeworld was beautiful in a way that hurt to look at. Crystal spires reached into a purple sky. Floating gardens drifted between towers. Everything was ordered, precise, perfect. It was so different from Earth's chaotic cities and jury-rigged space stations. A Viridian escort met G1 at the landing platform. She had 4 eyes like Kayla, but her coloring was different, more silver than blue. Admiral Park, I am Coordinator Nessa. Commander Kayla is in the medical facility. Please follow me. They walked through corridors of smooth crystal that seemed to glow with inner light. Other Viridians stopped to stare at G1 as he passed. News of the human who had fought beside one of their soldiers had spread throughout their empire. Some looked curious. Others looked afraid. The medical facility was quiet and serene. Rows of regeneration tanks lined the walls, each containing a patient suspended in glowing fluid. Nessa led G1 to one particular tank in a private room. Kayla floated inside, her eyes closed. Her left arm was growing back, currently about half its normal length. Scars covered her body, some already fading under the regeneration process. She looked peaceful, almost like she was sleeping. She has been unconscious for 11 weeks, Nessa explained. The damage was extensive. Multiple organ failures, severe radiation exposure, loss of limb. Any other species would have died instantly. Our regeneration technology is the only reason she survived. When will she wake up? G1 asked, his hand pressed against the tank's surface. Soon. Her body has healed enough that consciousness is returning. In fact, the medical team believes she might wake within the next few hours. We thought you should be here when she does. Nessa left G1 alone with Kayla. He sat in a chair beside the tank and waited. Minutes turned into an hour, then 2. He watched her float in the fluid, looking for any sign of waking. Finally, Kayla's eyes opened. All 4 of them blinking slowly as awareness returned. She saw G1 through the fluid and her eyes widened. Her mouth moved, forming words he couldn't hear through the tank's sealed environment. Nessa returned with a medical team. They drained the tank carefully, lowering Kayla onto a platform as the fluid receded. She coughed, gasping as her lungs adjusted to breathing air again. Someone wrapped her in a thermal blanket. The first words out of her mouth were, "Did everyone make it?" G1 felt tears on his face. After 3 months, after everything, her first concern was still for his crew. 19 made it home. 15 didn't. You saved them, Kayla. You saved all of us. She closed her eyes, absorbing that information. 15. Too many. I should have been faster, led the Krell farther away. You did everything possible, G1 interrupted. You gave your life for people you barely knew. You can't take on their deaths as your failure. Kayla looked at him with those 4 eyes that saw too much. That is exactly what you do, isn't it? Carry the weight of everyone who didn't make it. I learned that from you too. The medical team wanted to run more tests, but Kayla insisted on sitting up, on talking. Her new arm was still small, like a child's, but already functional. She flexed the tiny fingers experimentally. I remember setting the reactor to overload, she said quietly. I remember thinking about Hyejan, about all of you. And then I thought, what would a human do? A human wouldn't just accept death. A human would find a way to survive even when survival seemed impossible. So you ejected, G1 said, at the last possible second. I knew the explosion would probably kill me anyway, but there was a small chance the pod's shields would hold. A very small chance. 3%, maybe less. But humans seem to specialize in surviving those 3% odds. G1 laughed and cried at the same time. You learned too well. Now you're as crazy as we are. I believe the proper human phrase is, I learned from the best. Over the next few days, Kayla recovered quickly. Viridian regeneration technology was remarkable. Her arm grew longer each day. The scars faded. Within a week, she was walking around, insisting on showing G1 her world. They walked through crystal gardens where plants from 100 worlds grew in careful arrangements. Kayla explained Viridian history, their culture, their long war against the Krell. Ji-won told her about Earth, about the 19 crew members who had made it home, about the memorials they had built for the 15 who hadn't. "Your people want me to testify before the Viridian Council," Kayla said one evening as they stood on a balcony overlooking the city. "About humanity, about whether your species should be allowed into the Galactic Coalition." "What will you tell them?" Ji-won asked. Kayla was quiet for a long moment. "The truth, that humans are dangerous, that you don't follow established protocols, that you solve problems in ways that seem insane to other species, that you take risks that no logical being should take." She paused. "And that those are exactly the qualities we need in the fight against the Krell." "You think they'll listen?" "Some will. Others are terrified of what humanity represents. You're unpredictable, Captain Admiral. You turned a first contact infiltration into an alliance. You destroyed your own ship to win a battle. You survived 2 weeks behind enemy lines and crippled Krell operations in an entire sector, all with inferior technology and a crew of non-soldiers. We just did what we had to do. That's what scares them. You don't see limitations the way other species do. Where we see impossible situations, you see challenges to overcome. Where we see acceptable losses, you see reasons to fight harder. You're going to change the galaxy, G1, whether we're ready for it or not." The next day, Kayla stood before the Viridian Council. It was held in a massive chamber where representatives from dozens of species gathered to discuss galactic matters. Ji-won sat in the audience. The council chamber was silent except for Kayla's voice. She stood before the assembled representatives of 43 different species, her fully healed body standing straight despite the weight of what she was about to say. "I stand before you not as a soldier giving a report, but as someone who has seen humanity up close. I infiltrated their ship expecting to find a primitive species stumbling blindly through space. What I found instead was something that terrifies me even now." Whispers rippled through the chamber. Ji-won watched from his seat in the diplomatic section, trying to read the faces of alien representatives. Some looked curious. Others looked hostile. All of them were listening, Kayla continued. "Humanity does not follow our norms because they never learned our norms existed. They solve problems with creativity, born from centuries of surviving on a single world where resources were scarce, and conflict was constant. They do not see limitations the way we do. Where we see impossible situations, they see opportunities. Where we calculate acceptable losses, they calculate acceptable risks and then double them." A council member from the Thalon species raised a tentacle. "Commander Kayla, are you recommending we admit this dangerous species into the coalition or warning us to quarantine them?" "Both," Kayla answered honestly. "Humanity is dangerous. They will disrupt everything we have built. They will question our methods, ignore our protocols, and find ways around our restrictions. They will make us uncomfortable with their tactics and their willingness to sacrifice." She paused. "But the Krell are extinction. We have held them at bay for 300 years using superior technology. In that time, we have not gained a single meter of territory. We maintain defensive lines and call it victory. Humanity destroyed 3 Krell hatcheries and crippled operations in an entire sector in 2 weeks, with damaged equipment and a crew of explorers, not soldiers, and lost nearly half their people doing it," another council member pointed out. "By any civilized standard, that mission was a failure." Kayla's 4 eyes fixed on the speaker. "By civilized standards, yes. But the Krell are not civilized. They are a force of nature that consumes everything in its path. You cannot negotiate with them. You cannot maintain a permanent defensive line against them. Eventually they will break through. And when they do, your protocols and your civilized standards will not save you. Humanity will." The debate that followed lasted for hours. Representatives argued about the risks of allowing humans into the coalition. They questioned whether humanity's aggressive tactics could be controlled. They worried about what would happen if human methods spread to other species. Through it all, Kayla stood her ground. She showed them footage of the battle against the Krell swarm, of the improvised tactics that had won against impossible odds. She explained human concepts like acceptable risk and calculated sacrifice that seemed insane to species that prioritize preservation above all else. Finally, the chairman called for a vote. All those in favor of extending coalition membership to humanity, under standard probationary restrictions and monitoring protocols. The vote was close. 23 in favor, 18 against. 2 abstentions. But it was enough. The chamber erupted in conversation. Some representatives looked pleased. Others looked horrified. The galaxy had just changed in ways no one could fully predict. After the session, Ji-Won found Kayla in a private observation room overlooking the Viridian capital. She stood at the window, her reflection showing all 4 eyes heavy with exhaustion. "You did it," Ji-Won said. "Humanity is in. With conditions," Kayla reminded him. "Human military tactics must be reviewed by Coalition Command. Human expansion must follow established protocols. Human diplomats must be trained in proper galactic customs." The list goes on for 20 pages. "And we'll follow about half of those rules," Ji-Won said with a slight smile. "The important half. The rest we'll work around." Kayla turned to face him. "You're not concerned? The galaxy is not ready for what humanity represents. Many species will resist your methods. There will be conflicts, disagreements, possibly even violence." "Good," Ji-Won said. "Friction creates progress. If everyone just maintains the status quo, nothing changes. The Krell keep pushing and eventually they win. But if we shake things up, if we show other species that there are different ways to fight, different ways to survive, maybe we stand a chance." They walked through the crystal gardens later that evening, following paths that glowed softly in the dimming light. Other Viridians gave them space, recognizing the human ambassador and the soldier who had testified on his behalf. "Tell me something," Kayla said after a long silence. "That first day when you woke up and found me on top of you, did you ever imagine it would lead to this?" Ji-Won laughed. "Honestly, I thought I was either dreaming or about to die. Probably both. I never imagined that awkward first contact would result in an alliance between species. I thought you were prey. In my culture, positioning yourself over a sleeping opponent is a dominance display. I was challenging you, establishing superiority before combat. Instead, you asked to use the bathroom and suggested putting on pants. Not exactly the dramatic first contact either of us expected. No. But perhaps that's fitting. Nothing about our relationship has followed expected patterns. I was supposed to observe and report. Instead, I fought beside you. You were supposed to be explorers. Instead, you became warriors. I was supposed to die on Vorath III. Instead, you taught me to survive the unsurvivable." They reached a viewpoint where the city spread out below them, crystal towers catching the last light of the setting sun. In the distance, the Coalition spaceport showed ships from dozens of different species coming and going. Soon human vessels would join them, bringing more of Ji-Won's people to this strange new community. "I've been thinking about your question," Kayla said. "The one you asked on Vorath III, why I sleep naked." Ji-Won raised an eyebrow, surprised she remembered that conversation. "And? You said it was because of broken temperature regulators, that you couldn't afford to fix everything. So you fixed what mattered and adapted to the rest. I think that explains everything about humanity. You don't wait for perfect conditions. You work with what you have and adapt to fill the gaps. It's called making do. It's a human specialty. It's more than that. It's a philosophy. Other species see broken systems as problems that require proper solutions. Humans see broken systems as opportunities for creative adaptation. You thrive in situations that would cripple other civilizations because you're comfortable with discomfort. You're used to things being imperfect. A message chimed on Ji-Won's communicator. He checked it and smiled. First Joint Patrol. Human Viridian crew, heading out to monitor the old defensive line near Vorath III. They're launching in an hour. Kayla looked at the departure schedule on her own device. Captain Minho is commanding the human contingent. Good choice. He learned well from you. We all learned from each other. That's the whole point of this alliance, isn't it? Sharing knowledge, combining strengths, covering each other's weaknesses. They watched as the joint patrol ship launched from the distant spaceport, its engines leaving a trail of light against the darkening sky. It was a hybrid design, combining Viridian technology with human improvisation. The engineers from both species had argued constantly during construction, but the result was something neither could have built alone. The galaxy will never fully trust humanity, Kayla said quietly. Even after today's vote, there will always be those who see your species as dangerous wildcards. Your methods will be questioned. Your tactics will be criticized. Some species will resist working with you. I know, Ji-Won replied. And honestly, that's fine. Being trusted means being predictable. Being predictable means being vulnerable. The Krell adapt to predictable opponents. They've been doing it for centuries, but they can't adapt to opponents who keep changing the rules. That's what worries the Council. Humanity doesn't just bend rules, you break them and build something new from the pieces. Only when the old rules don't work. If the protocols were effective, we'd follow them. But you said it yourself. The Coalition has been fighting the Krell to a stalemate for 300 years. That's not winning. That's just not losing yet. Sometimes you need someone to come in and break everything so you can rebuild it better. Kayla thought about the scars she had chosen to keep, physical reminders of what she had learned from humans, the willingness to sacrifice, to take risks, to push beyond comfortable limits in pursuit of victory rather than survival. I included a recommendation in my final report, she said, that the Coalition should study human military academies. Understand how you train your people to think creatively under pressure. Not to copy your methods exactly, but to learn the philosophy behind them. And it was rejected by a vote of 32 to 11. Most council members believe human tactics are too dangerous to spread to other species. They're worried about creating more unpredictable warriors. They're probably right to be worried, G1 admitted. But war is coming whether they're ready or not. The Krell won't stop. They never stop. And when the next big battle comes, the galaxy will need every advantage it can get, including the dangerous, unpredictable humans who don't know when to quit.